The crystal spires of Avalon reached toward 3 moons, their surfaces gleaming like captured starlight. Princess Lirelei stood at her tower window, watching the busy streets below. Today would change everything, though she didn't know it yet. A soft chime announced her visitor. Captain Vexistar entered, his blue skin darker than usual with anger. Behind him walked a creature she had only heard about in stories, a human. The human was smaller than she expected, no taller than her shoulder, with brown hair and dark eyes. He wore simple black clothing and carried weapons that looked ancient compared to the energy rifles her guards used. This was supposed to be her new protector. "Princess," Vextar said through gritted teeth, "the Galactic Council has sent this person to serve as your bodyguard." The human stepped forward and gave a small bow. "Jake Martinez, Your Highness. I'm here to keep you safe." His voice was rough, different from the melodic tones of her people. Lirelei studied his face. Where other species had enhanced features, larger eyes, sharper hearing, telepathic abilities, this human looked ordinary. "Almost primitive. The Council insults us," Vextar whispered to her, "sending a creature that barely knows how to use technology." Jake's head turned slightly. Lirelei wondered if he had heard the comment. His expression didn't change, but something in his eyes grew harder. "Tell me about yourself, Jake Martinez," she said. "Not much to tell, Princess. I spent 10 years in the Earth Colonial Marines, fought in 3 border wars. Now I protect people. And you think you can protect me better than my guard?" Jake looked at Captain Vextar, then back at her. "I think I can protect you differently." That afternoon, they tested his claim. The market square of Avalon buzzed with activity. Merchants from across the galaxy sold their wares under floating canopies. Princess Lirelei walked among them, greeting her people as she did every week. It was a tradition that showed she cared about common citizens. Jake stayed close to her left side, his eyes constantly moving. He didn't carry the fancy scanners or shields that her other guards used. Instead, he relied on something more basic, his senses. Captain Vextar commanded 12 elite guards. They formed a protective circle around the princess, their weapons ready and their enhanced vision scanning for threats. They looked impressive in their golden armor. Lirelei stopped at a fruit vendor's stall. The old merchant, a kindly Zephyrian with silver scales, offered her a sample of his sweetest produce. She smiled and reached for it. Jake moved faster than thought. His shoulder slammed into her chest, knocking her backward into Captain Vextar's arms. At the same moment, his pistol appeared in his hand. 3 shots echoed through the square before anyone else could react. The old merchant's disguise flickered and died. Underneath was a skeever assassin, its natural armor smoking from Jake's bullets. The fruit in its hand wasn't fruit at all, but a neural toxin dispenser that would have killed the princess instantly. 2 more shots came from somewhere in the crowd. Jake was already moving, dragging the princess behind a stone pillar. More bullets sparked off the stone where her head had been. "Contact left, 2 more right side," Jake called to the guards. His voice was calm, like he was discussing the weather. Snipers on the roof of the blue building. The Zephyrian guards scrambled to catch up. Their advanced equipment showed them exactly what Jake had somehow spotted with just his eyes. 4 more assassins moving through the crowd. The fight lasted 3 minutes. When it ended, 6 would-be killers lay dead. Jake stood over the princess, reloading his primitive weapon while her elite guards were still processing what had happened. "How?" Captain Vextar demanded. "Our sensors showed nothing wrong with that merchant." Jake holstered his gun. "Your sensors look for energy signatures and hidden weapons. They don't look for nervous sweat or the wrong muscle tension in someone's shoulders." Muscle tension? The old man was too stiff. Real merchants move their hands differently when they talk. This one kept his trigger finger ready the whole time. Princess Lirelei stared at her new protector. "You saw all that in a few seconds?" Humans are good at reading body language. We had to be, back when we were prey animals. Some instincts stick around. That evening, the princess sat in her private chamber with Jake standing guard by the door. The day's events had shaken her more than she wanted to admit. "Why did you save me?" she asked. "You've only known me for 1 day." Jake was quiet for a long moment. "My job is to keep you alive. That's not what I mean. Captain Vextar would have saved me too, but only after his equipment told him there was danger. You moved before you could have known for certain. I'd rather be wrong and embarrassed than right and have you dead." She studied his profile in the dim light. "Other species think humans are primitive, weak. Is that true?" Jake smiled for the first time since she'd met him. Princess, every species in this galaxy has made themselves stronger, faster, or smarter than they used to be. They've got better eyes, better hearing, better brains. But they've lost something in the process. What? The ability to be irrationally, stupidly brave when someone they care about is in danger. You care about me? After one day. He looked at her directly. You're under my protection. That makes you mine to keep safe. It's not romantic or anything complicated. It's just how humans work. When we claim someone as ours to protect, we'll die before we let them get hurt. Princess Lyrelei felt something shift in her understanding of the universe. This small, ordinary-looking human had just shown her something that all the galaxy's advanced technology couldn't replicate. Pure, unthinking loyalty. The Council didn't insult us by sending you, she said quietly. They gave us something precious, Jake shrugged. They gave you someone who won't overthink when bullets start flying. Outside her window, the 3 moons of Avalon cast their light on the Crystal City. In that light, Princess Lyrelei saw her future changing. She had always been protected by duty and honor and programming. Now she was protected by something far more dangerous. She was protected by choice. 3 weeks had passed since the market attack, and Jake Martinez had become the most talked-about guard in the Zephyrian Empire. Not because anyone liked him, but because he kept saving Princess Lyrelei's life in ways that made no sense. The second attempt came during a diplomatic dinner with the hegemony of Siral. The princess wore her formal gown of starlight silver, sitting at the head table with 40 of the galaxy's most important leaders. Jake stood behind her chair, looking uncomfortable in his dress uniform. Captain Vextar had positioned his guards throughout the dining hall. Their scanners showed nothing dangerous. All weapons had been checked, all food tested, all guests verified. The security was perfect. Jake's eyes never stopped moving. Ambassador Kithlar of Siral was telling a funny story about trade negotiations. The other guests laughed politely. Princess Lyrelei smiled and reached for her wine glass. Jake's hand slammed down on her shoulder, driving her face toward the table just as a beam of superheated particles cut through the air where her head had been. The molecular disruptor beam hit the wall behind her, leaving a smoking hole 3 inches wide. Before anyone else could react, Jake's gun was out and firing. The Ceralian delegate sitting 12 seats away jerked backward, dark blood spreading across his formal robes. The hidden weapon fell from his dead fingers. Chaos erupted in the dining hall. Guards shouted orders. Guests screamed and dove for cover, and alarms blared throughout the building. Through it all, Jake stood calmly over the princess, scanning for more threats. How did you know? Captain Vextar demanded later, after the scene was secured. Our scans showed nothing. The assassin had no weapons, no energy signatures, nothing. Jake was cleaning his gun with slow, careful movements. His ears? His ears? Ceralians' ears twitch when they're nervous. This one was trying to control it, but every few seconds the left ear would flutter. Plus, he kept looking at the princess's forehead instead of her eyes when she talked. You could see ear movements from that distance? Humans are good at reading faces. We had to be. Back on Earth, the difference between a friendly smile and a predator's grin could mean life or death. Princess Lyrelei touched the spot on her shoulder where Jake had grabbed her. It would bruise tomorrow. How many species can do what you just did? None that I know of, Jake said. Most aliens I've met are smarter than humans, stronger than humans, faster than humans. But they think too much. When I saw that ear twitch, I didn't stop to analyze the threat level or check my equipment. I just moved. Is that why humans are good at war? Jake looked at her for a long moment. Humans aren't good at war, Princess. We're good at surviving. There's a difference. The third attempt came during a cultural festival in the lower city. Princess Lyrelei walked among performers and artists, watching traditional dances and listening to ancient music. The crowds were huge, happy, and celebrating. Jake stayed close, but something was bothering him. Captain Vextar noticed his tension. The security scans are clean, the captain said. No weapons, no explosives, no hostile individuals detected. Too clean, Jake muttered. What do you mean? Look around. Thousands of people, all happy, all celebrating. But watch their eyes. Captain Vextar activated his enhanced vision, scanning the crowd. I see normal festival behavior. That's the problem. Everyone's acting normal, but look at their eye movements. Real people at festivals look around randomly. At performers, at food, at friends. Half this crowd is tracking the princess's movement. Before Vextar could respond, Jake was moving. He grabbed Princess Lyrelei around the waist and threw both of them behind a festival booth, just as the crowd exploded into violence. 50 hidden assassins revealed themselves at once, pulling concealed weapons from beneath clothing and inside musical instruments. They moved with perfect coordination, closing in from all directions, but Jake had seen them coming. His first shots took down the 3 closest threats. Then he was moving, using the festival booths as cover, drawing the assassins away from the princess. His gun barked steadily, each shot finding its target. The assassins were professionals, well-trained and well-equipped. They should have overwhelmed one human easily, but Jake didn't fight like they expected. When they tried to surround him, he moved to where they couldn't use their numbers. When they used superior firepower, he got close enough that their big weapons became useless. When they coordinated their attacks, he did something completely random that ruined their plans. Captain Vextar and his guards joined the fight, but by then Jake had already eliminated half the threats. The battle ended with dead assassins scattered across the festival grounds and one untouched princess. "Explain," Captain Vextar said afterward. "Humans evolved as pack hunters," Jake said simply. "We're not the strongest or fastest predators, but we're the most persistent. We don't give up, we adapt quickly, and we work together better than anyone else. But you fought alone." "I fought to protect my pack. That's different." Princess Lyrelei watched Jake check his weapons and reload. There was something almost mechanical about his movements, like he had done this 1,000 times before. "Do all humans fight like you?" she asked. "No, most humans are peaceful, but when we need to fight, when someone we care about is threatened, we become something else." "What?" Jake looked at her with those dark human eyes. "Dangerous." That night, Princess Lyrelei couldn't sleep. She stood at her window thinking about the day's events. Jake had moved through those assassins like they were nothing, but afterward he had checked her for injuries with gentle hands. "Jake," she called softly. He appeared in her doorway instantly. "Yes, Princess." "How do you switch between violence and gentleness so easily?" Jake was quiet for a long time. "Because you're not the enemy," he said finally. "To me, there are only 2 kinds of people in the universe. People who might hurt you and people who won't. I treat each kind very differently. Which kind are you?" "I'm the kind who dies before you get hurt." Princess Lyrelei felt something warm and unfamiliar in her chest. No one had ever spoken to her like that before. Not with worship or duty or fear, but with simple, honest devotion. "Why?" she whispered. Jake smiled that rare smile. "Because you're mine to protect, Princess, and humans don't give up on what's theirs." Princess Lyrelei woke up in darkness, her head pounding and her mouth dry. The air smelled wrong, metallic and cold instead of the sweet atmosphere of Avalon. When she tried to move, metal restraints bit into her wrists. She was no longer on her homeworld. Memory came back slowly. The attack on her private transport, Jake fighting desperately as enemy ships surrounded them. The stunning blast that had knocked her unconscious just as she heard him scream her name. A door slid open, letting in harsh red light. 3 figures entered, aliens she didn't recognize, wearing the black uniforms of the Shadow Syndicate, the terrorist organization that had been striking at the Empire for years. "Princess Lyrelei," the leader said in accented standard. "Welcome to Cathera Prime, the dead world, a planet so poisoned by war that nothing could live on its surface. The perfect place to hide a kidnapped princess. The Empire will find me," she said, trying to sound braver than she felt. "No doubt they will try. Your Captain Vextar is probably mobilizing the fleet as we speak. But Cathera Prime has defenses that have never been breached. You will remain here until your Empire agrees to our terms." "What terms?" "Complete withdrawal from the Outer Rim territories, recognition of Syndicate sovereignty over 12 star systems, and the execution of every human in Imperial service." Lyrelei's blood went cold. "Why the humans?" "They are a disease," the leader spat. "A primitive species that doesn't know its place. Your pet human killed 47 of our best operatives in 3 weeks. We want his kind eliminated. Jake is just one person. Jake Martinez is a symbol of human arrogance. When we broadcast his failure to save you, the galaxy will see that humans are not the protectors they pretend to be." The leader gestured to a wall screen that showed the fortress exterior. Miles of walls, defensive towers, and energy barriers surrounded the complex. Automated weapons tracked anything that moved. It would take an army to break through. "Your human will come," the leader continued. "They always do. Humans cannot resist trying to rescue what they consider theirs. When he arrives, we will kill him slowly and show the galaxy how easily human heroes die." Princess Lyralee said nothing, but inside she felt a strange certainty. Jake would come. Not because he was ordered to, not because duty demanded it, but because he had claimed her as his to protect. The question was whether he could survive what was waiting for him. 3 days later, the fortress sensors detected an incoming ship, a small outdated transport heading straight for Cathera Prime. No escort, no backup, no support fleet, just Jake Martinez, alone. "Magnificent," the syndicate leader said, watching the approach on his command screen. "The human thinks he can assault our fortress by himself." The transport ship crashed into the outer perimeter, exactly as expected. Emergency teams rushed to investigate, ready to capture the foolish human who thought he could mount a one-man rescue. They found the ship empty except for a recorded message. "I'm coming for her," Jake's voice said simply. "You have one chance to surrender." The syndicate forces laughed. One human against a fortress designed to stop armies? It was impossible. The first explosion came 30 minutes later. The outer sensor array vanished in a ball of fire, taking 6 guards with it. Before anyone could respond, the power grid to Section 7 failed. Then the water processing plant stopped working. Then the communication array went silent. Jake wasn't trying to break into the fortress. He was breaking it piece by piece. "Find him!" The leader screamed at his forces. One human cannot do this. But Jake wasn't fighting like other species expected. He didn't try to match their superior technology or numbers. Instead, he used everything the dead world offered against them. He turned their own defensive systems into weapons, overloading power cores to create explosions. He used the poisoned atmosphere to hide his movements, breathing through a simple filter while their expensive sensors failed in the toxic air. He made weapons from debris, traps from maintenance tunnels, and turned their fortress into a maze that worked for him instead of them. Princess Lyralee watched through security feeds as Jake moved through the complex like a ghost made of violence. He appeared from nowhere, struck with devastating efficiency, and vanished before reinforcements arrived. Guards who had terrorized the galaxy for years ran in panic from shadows that might hide the human. "How is he doing this?" one of her captors whispered. Lyralee knew. She had seen it in his eyes that first day. The absolute unthinking determination to protect what he considered his. Jake wasn't fighting to be a hero or prove himself. He was fighting because someone had taken his princess, and that was unacceptable. The fortress's elite guards were some of the deadliest fighters in the galaxy. They had enhanced strength, advanced weapons, and years of combat experience. They should have crushed one human easily, but they had never faced anything like human fury. Jake didn't retreat when wounded. He became more dangerous. He didn't surrender when outnumbered. He used their numbers against them. When their weapons were better, he took them. When their armor was stronger, he found the weak spots. Most terrifying of all, he never stopped. Other species fought until victory or defeat. Jake fought until his princess was safe and nothing else mattered. Hour by hour, the fortress fell apart around them. Guards abandoned their posts. Automated systems failed or turned against their operators. The impregnable stronghold became a death trap for its own defenders. Finally, the security feed showed Jake outside her cell door. He looked terrible, bleeding from a dozen wounds, his uniform torn and burned, exhaustion written across his face. But his eyes still held that same deadly determination. The cell door exploded inward. Jake stood in the smoke and debris, his gun trained on the 3 syndicate members who had been guarding her. They raised their hands in surrender. "Where is the key to her restraints?" he asked quietly. They pointed to a control panel with shaking hands. Jake shot the panel instead, shorting out the magnetic locks. Princess Lyralee's restraints fell away. "Are you hurt?" he asked, not taking his eyes off the guards. "No," she whispered. "Good. Stay behind me." He gestured for the guards to move away from her. They scrambled to obey, terrified of the human who had destroyed their fortress single-handedly. "Jake," Princess Lyralee said softly, "why did you come alone?" He glanced at her briefly, and she saw something in his expression that made her heart stop. Not love exactly, but something deeper and more primitive. "Because you're mine to protect," he said simply, "and nobody takes what's mine." As they walked through the burning fortress toward freedom, Princess Lyrelei finally understood what made humans so terrifying to the rest of the galaxy. It wasn't their weapons or their tactics or their stubborn refusal to give up. It was their capacity to love someone so completely that they would burn down the universe to keep them safe. The rescue ship arrived at Cathara Prime to find a fortress in ruins and two figures walking through the smoke. Jake moved slowly, favoring his left leg and leaving a trail of blood behind him. Princess Lyrelei stayed close to his side, supporting him when he stumbled. Captain Vextar ran the medical scanners himself when they came aboard. Jake had 17 separate wounds, had lost enough blood to kill most species, and showed signs of severe exhaustion. He should have collapsed hours ago. Why didn't you wait for backup? Vextar demanded as medics worked on Jake's injuries. We could have brought a fleet. Jake winced as they sealed a particularly deep cut on his arm. Couldn't wait. Every hour they had her was an hour too long. You could have died. She could have died while I was waiting for permission to save her. Princess Lyrelei watched the medics work. She had seen Jake fight, seen him shrug off wounds that would cripple other species, but now he looked fragile. Human. The sight made something ache in her chest. The Syndicate leadership is dead, she told Captain Vextar quietly. All of them. Jake didn't just rescue me. He eliminated the entire organization. How many were in the fortress? Over 300. Vextar stared at Jake with something approaching awe. One human did all that? One human who was protecting what he loved, the princess corrected. The word slipped out before she could stop it. Love. Not duty or honor or professional obligation. Love. Jake's eyes met hers across the medical bay. Something passed between them, an understanding that changed everything. The journey back to Avalon took 2 days. While Jake recovered in the ship's medical bay, news of the rescue spread across the galaxy. The story grew with each telling. The human who destroyed an entire terrorist organization to save one princess. Alien species that had dismissed humans as primitive began asking different questions. The Galactic Council received over 4,000 requests for human bodyguards in the first day after the news broke. But Princess Lyrelei faced a bigger problem than galactic politics. She was in love with her bodyguard, and the laws of the Zephyrian Empire forbade royal family members from having personal relationships with their protectors. The council expects you to dismiss him, her father, Emperor Thane, told her when they arrived home. They're calling him a dangerous influence. Some are saying humans are too emotionally unstable to serve in protection roles. He saved my life, multiple times. He also started a war. Half the Syndicate's allies are calling for revenge against humanity. Princess Lyrelei stood at her window, looking out at the crystal city she would one day rule. What do you think, father? Emperor Thane was quiet for a long moment. I think I have never seen anyone fight for my daughter the way that human did. The security recordings from Cathara Prime. What he did should have been impossible. But the law is clear. You cannot have a personal relationship with your guard. If you wish to keep Jake Martinez in your service, it must remain strictly professional. That evening, Princess Lyrelei sat with Jake in her private chambers. He was still healing, moving carefully and wearing bandages under his uniform, but his eyes were alert, watching her with that familiar protective intensity. We need to talk, she said. Jake nodded. He had probably seen this coming. The Empire wants me to dismiss you. They say you're too dangerous, too unpredictable. They want someone more controllable. Are you going to? The question hung in the air between them. Princess Lyrelei looked at this human who had torn apart a fortress for her, who had bled and nearly died to keep her safe. That depends, she said carefully. What are we, Jake? What is this between us? Jake was quiet for a long time. When he spoke, his voice was softer than she had ever heard it. I don't know what it is by your people's standards. All I know is that somewhere in the last few weeks you stopped being just my assignment. You became mine, not in a possessive way, but in a protective way. Like pack. Pack? Humans are social animals. We form bonds with people we care about, and those bonds are stronger than duty or law or logic. When someone threatens our pack, we respond with everything we have. Princess Lyrelei felt her heart racing. Is that what I am to you, pack? Jake looked directly at her. You're the most important person in my universe. I would burn down star systems to keep you safe. I would fight armies, face gods, challenge death itself if it meant protecting you. That's not professional duty. No, Jake admitted. It's not. They sat in silence, both understanding what couldn't be said. The Empire's laws were clear. Personal relationships between royalty and guards were forbidden. But what they felt for each other had moved far beyond the boundaries of professional duty. There might be a way, Princess Lyrelay said slowly. The law forbids personal relationships between royalty and their protectors. But it says nothing about relationships between royalty and their advisors. Jake raised an eyebrow. Advisor? You've shown remarkable strategic thinking. Your understanding of security threats is unmatched. The Empire could use someone with your unique perspective in a consulting role. And if I'm not your bodyguard anymore? Princess Lyrelay smiled for the first time in days. Then the law no longer applies to us. Jake was quiet, thinking it through. I'd still want to protect you, I know, but you'd be protecting me as someone who cares about me, not someone who's paid to care about me. There's a difference. The Council might not approve. The Council will approve what I tell them to approve. I'm not just a princess, Jake. I'm the heir to the throne, and someday I'll be making the laws instead of following them. Jake looked at her with something like wonder. You'd change the law for me? I'd change the universe for you. The words came out before she could stop them, honest and raw and completely true. Princess Lyrelay realized she had just confessed her love to a human bodyguard, breaking every rule of royal behavior. Jake's response was to reach for her hand. Then I accept the position, he said quietly. Advisor Martinez at your service. Their fingers intertwined, and Princess Lyrelay felt something she had never experienced before. Not the worship of subjects or the respect of equals, but the simple, honest love of someone who had chosen her above everything else in the galaxy. Outside her window, the 3 moons of Avalon cast their light on a changing empire. Word was already spreading about the human who had become something more than a bodyguard. He had become the princess's chosen champion, and that would change everything. 6 months later, the convergence of worlds brought every major species leader to the neutral station of Harmony Point. It was the galaxy's most important diplomatic gathering, where treaties were signed and the future of civilization was decided. Princess Lyrelay attended as heir to the Zephyrian throne, with Jake at her side as her official advisor. The change in his status had caused whispers throughout the diplomatic corps. Everyone knew the human had become more than just a protector. The station buzzed with tension. Jake's destruction of the Shadow Syndicate had sent shockwaves through the galaxy's criminal organizations, but it had also created new enemies. Several species supremacist groups had formed an alliance, united in their hatred of humanity's growing influence. Too many exits, Jake muttered, as they entered the main assembly hall. Too many sightlines. Too many places to hide weapons. The security here is supposed to be perfect, Princess Lyrelay reminded him. Weapon scanners, shield generators, automated defenses. Perfect security assumes enemies follow the rules. These people don't. Jake had been right to worry. As the opening ceremony began, Representative Cross of the Supremacy Coalition stood to address the assembly. His speech started as a formal protest against humanity's inclusion in galactic affairs, but quickly became something uglier. Humans are a plague, he declared, his voice carrying across the vast hall. A primitive species that corrupts everything it touches. Their so-called protective instincts are nothing but barely controlled savagery. Murmurs rippled through the audience. Some delegates nodded in agreement, while others looked uncomfortable with the harsh words. We have seen what happens when humans are allowed to operate freely, Cross continued. They destroy entire installations, eliminate hundreds of beings, and call it protection. This is not civilization, this is barbarism. Princess Lyrelay felt Jake tense beside her, but his expression remained calm. He had learned to ignore insults over the months. What concerned him was the way certain delegates were positioned around the hall. Princess Lyrelay, Cross said, turning his attention to her directly. You have been deceived by your human pet. He has made you believe that his violence is noble, that his primitive emotions are strength. But what protection can he truly offer when faced with superior beings? The attack began with those words. Hidden weapons emerged from concealed compartments. Disguised assassins threw off their diplomatic robes. The perfect security of Harmony Point had been compromised by months of careful planning. But the supremacists had made one critical error. They had studied Jake's previous battles and prepared for a human who fought like he had before. They didn't understand that Jake had been learning too. The first wave of attackers came from 6 directions at once, coordinated to overwhelm any single defender. Jake didn't try to fight them all. Instead, he grabbed Princess Lyrelei and moved toward what looked like the most dangerous position, directly toward the largest group of enemies. It was the last place they expected him to go, which made it the safest place to be for exactly the 3 seconds he needed to reach the emergency blast shields. The shields slammed down, separating the hall into sections. Now, instead of facing overwhelming numbers, Jake faced manageable groups isolated from each other. "Stay behind the shield," he told Princess Lyrelei. "This won't take long." What followed was not the desperate struggle the supremacists had planned. It was a demonstration of what humans had become under pressure. Jake moved through the separated sections like a force of nature. He had learned from every previous fight, adapted to every enemy tactic, and developed strategies that used his human advantages to their fullest. When energy weapons fired at him, he was already moving to where they couldn't track. When superior numbers tried to surround him, he used the station's architecture to limit their approach. When advanced technology tried to overwhelm him, he responded with human unpredictability. But most importantly, he fought with the absolute certainty that nothing in the universe mattered more than keeping Princess Lyrelei safe. The battle raged through multiple sections of the station. Jake eliminated threats with ruthless efficiency, clearing each area before moving to the next. The supremacist forces began to break, their careful coordination falling apart in the face of human adaptability. In the end, Princess Lyrelei found herself separated from Jake during the fighting. A group of supremacist leaders cornered her in a side chamber, their weapons trained on her heart. Representative Cross smiled coldly as he approached. "Where is your precious human now, Princess? You see how quickly his protection fails when faced with true power." Princess Lyrelei looked at the alien who thought he had trapped her. She felt no fear, only a calm certainty that made her smile. "You misunderstand the question," she said quietly. "What? You asked where my human is when I need protection. But that's not the right question." Cross frowned, confused by her calm demeanor. Around him, his allies shifted nervously. "The right question," Princess Lyrelei continued, "is who protects you so fiercely that you think you can threaten me in his presence?" The supremacist leader opened his mouth to respond, then froze. Behind him, a shadow had moved. Jake stood in the doorway, his weapon trained on Cross's head. His uniform was torn and bloodied, but his hands were steady. "She's right," Jake said conversationally. "You should have asked a different question." Representative Cross spun around, his eyes wide with fear. "How did you get past our guards? Our barriers? Our sensors? You planned for the human you fought before," Jake said. "Not the human I became." The supremacist forces surrendered within minutes. Word spread quickly through the station. The human had single-handedly defeated an army of enhanced alien warriors. Later, as medical teams treated the wounded and security forces arrested the supremacists, the Galactic Council gathered for an emergency session. "The human problem has become critical," one delegate declared. "They're too dangerous to be allowed free movement through civilized space." "On the contrary," said Chancellor Veltar of the Centauri Republic, "I believe we've been asking the wrong questions about humanity." All eyes turned to him. "We've been asking whether humans are too primitive for modern civilization, whether their emotions make them unstable, whether their protective instincts are civilized." He paused, looking directly at Jake. "But perhaps we should be asking why every species in this galaxy wants what humans offer. Which is absolute, uncompromising loyalty. The certainty that someone will fight for you not because they're programmed to, not because honor demands it, not because they're paid to, but because they choose to love you." The chamber fell silent. Representative Martinez, Chancellor Veltar continued, "The Council formally recognizes humanity's unique role in galactic civilization. We request that Earth provide training advisors to help other species understand human protective methodologies." Jake looked at Princess Lyrelei, who nodded encouragingly. "Humans don't protect because we're the strongest or the smartest," he said. "We protect because when we love someone, we make them part of ourselves. And humans will do anything to protect themselves." 6 months later, Princess Lyrelei and Jake stood on the palace balcony, watching the sunset paint Avalon's crystal spires in shades of gold. The Empire had changed its laws about royal relationships, influenced by what they had witnessed. "Do you regret it?" she asked. Giving up Earth to stay here with me? Jake smiled and pulled her closer. Earth will always be there. But you're here now and you're mine to protect. Is that all I am? Something to protect? You're everything, he said simply. My princess, my partner, my pack, my home. You're the reason I get up in the morning and the last thing I think about at night. Princess Lyrelay leaned against his shoulder. The council asked me again today about humans. They want to understand what makes your species so effective as protectors. What did you tell them? She smiled, remembering her words to the assembled delegates. I told them that humans don't protect because they have to. They protect because they choose to love. And when a human loves someone, the universe itself bends to keep that person safe. The 3 moons of Avalon rose over the Crystal City, casting their light on a human and a princess who had changed the galaxy simply by caring about each other. In the end, that was the most human thing of all.